All right, so have you ever been watching one of those incredible videos from space? Astronauts floating around, and just for a second, a little voice in your head asks, is that actually real? Well, if you have, you are definitely not alone. Today, we're diving headfirst into a really heated online debate that's swirling around NASA's footage from Artemis II and the International Space Station. Some folks are pretty convinced it's all just an elaborate fake. So let's unpack that.
And it all kind of kicks off with this one Reddit post. The person who wrote it claims they've spent countless hours just poring over NASA footage, and that they found what they call cheap tricks that space agencies have supposedly been using for decades. Now, this isn't just some casual comment. They're framing this as a pretty serious investigation.
Look, we're not here to take sides one way or the other. What we're going to do is break down the claims, look at the so-called evidence they present, and then see how the community reacted. This is a really fascinating peek into how a modern conspiracy theory can get started and how these ideas get debated and challenged online.
So, how do they claim you can spot a fake? Well, the original poster doesn't just throw out a vague accusation. Nope. They actually created a very specific 4-part guide that they believe anyone can use to see these supposed deceptions for themselves.
Okay, so here are the 4 big tells. First up is inconsistent blurring, the idea that they intentionally blur parts of the screen to hide flaws. Second, they point to CGI floating objects, basically saying that some of the things you see floating around aren't real, they're just digital additions. Third is unnatural actor behavior. This is the idea that the astronauts are literally performers who might be sending signals to people off camera. And finally, faulty real-time reflections. They argue this is the hardest thing to get right, and because of that, it's the biggest giveaway.
Now, to really drive their point home, the user highlights one specific moment from a live stream that they say just blows the whole thing wide open. It's pretty clever, actually, how they take all 4 of their points and tie them all back to this single specific example.
It all starts with a scene that looks totally normal, something you'd expect to see from the ISS. There's a little plush toy just floating in zero gravity, drifting past an astronaut. You know, a classic visual to show what life is like up there. Nothing seems out of place.
And then, as the toy floats by, another astronaut reaches out their hand to grab it. Again, this is a super common thing to see in these broadcasts. It feels human, it feels real, and it just shows the crew interacting with their environment.
But here it is. This is the supposed gotcha moment. The user claims that if you look super closely at a reflection on some blurred equipment in the background, you can see the astronaut's hands, but the plush toy isn't there in the reflection. For them, this isn't just some camera glitch. This is undeniable proof that the toy was added in later with CGI.
So that's the claim, and it's a pretty big one. But you know how it goes on the internet? A claim like that is never, ever the end of the story. The community response was immediate, it was passionate, and man, it went in all sorts of different directions. Let's see how people reacted to all this.
And this exchange pretty much sums up the whole debate perfectly. You've got one person doubling down on the theory, saying rockets are just fancy fireworks that get dumped in the ocean. But then it's met with this really simple, practical comeback. Lol, you could just get a telescope and watch them go into space yourself. It's this perfect clash between a deep-seated belief and a call for simple, direct observation.
And the comments were just all over the map. Some people immediately started questioning the logic, right? Like, so China, Russia, Japan, and all of Europe are in on this giant conspiracy too? Others brought in their own, totally different beliefs, like the idea that space isn't a void at all, or that this is all a big cover-up for aliens. It really is a wild mix of perspectives.
And of course, you get comments like this. This represents the other side of the coin entirely. Just total dismissal, even a bit of mockery. It really highlights that this isn't just some polite debate over facts and figures. For a lot of people, it's a really personal clash of worldviews.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? Is it really about whether that one plush toy was real or not? Honestly, probably not. The real story here is what this whole exchange shows us about how we talk to each other online, how we decide what's true, who we choose to trust, and how we find our own little corners of the internet that see the world just like we do.
This whole thread is basically a perfect case study. It's a snapshot of something much, much bigger. The way we can all end up in these online communities where evidence is filtered through what we already believe. It becomes less about finding the objective truth and more about just reinforcing a reality that we all agree on. The argument itself becomes the point.
Which leaves us with this massive question, one that goes way beyond a single Reddit thread. In a world with deepfakes, with amazing CGI, with artificial intelligence getting more powerful every day, What does that old saying, seeing is believing, even mean anymore? That's something I think we're all going to have to figure out. Thanks for joining me.